All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our series on crisis proofing your organization. So I want to start uh, this series out with letting you know that this is not live. I'm on vacation. Why? Because I need a break, right? And so I decided to today's topic is actually going to be covering that crisis proofing your organization wellness, right? Because here's the deal: you can't crisis proof your organization without taking care of the humans in it, and that includes yourself. So I'm joined today with my partner JT, and we've also got Karen Falkenberg, the co-founder of Tiger's Eye Life. So Karen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here, and I will tell you a little bit about myself. I am a longtime employee of myself. I'm going to just say that because you have to really manage yourself, right? I have done numerous things from being an engineer to being a psychology professor to being a leadership coach to any number of things. And I currently now have taken all of that and have turned that into the opportunity to work with other people on their health and their fitness. So, wellness is a great topic for me to be here and talk with you about.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you're here. And it's awesome that you also have experience as a leadership coach because when we talk to leaders and organizations and we talk to them about crisis proofing or building strategy, that's what it seems to always be about something to do around the systems, the leadership, and they always forget about wellness. And, I spent 30 plus years in the government, and most of that time, my office didn't have a window. So I didn't get the privilege of looking out, getting the sunlight in. It was usually some basement somewhere, and the fluorescent lights. And I can't tell you how many times that people were sick, and it was just because we kept rebreathing everybody else's nasty germs. And those of us that tried to take care of ourselves, we're the ones that pretty much stayed healthy, right? But there was this reoccurring sicknesses and viruses going around. And then when the crisis hits, you have people that are sick. The stress builds up, and your immune system just plummets. So, what are some of the things you talk about leaders to leaders and organizations to help them understand maybe the science behind the stress and how that impacts wellness?
Yeah, your body can manage only so much stress. And I always tell people stress is necessary. Stress, in fact, is really positive. But when you have an overload of stress, that's when systems break down. So chronic stress is what you're really talking about. Always being in a windowless room, always grinding away at all hours of the day and not even really having some fresh air. So having stress on your body will cause it to break down. And what we know is when we're in a crisis, having people that are broken down is just not the place to be, to draw on employees who are humans, who are not cogs in a wheel. They are really needing the opportunity to get and stay healthy. And then when crisis comes along, they're really resilient and they're ready to pitch in and do what needs to be done.
Awesome. So, now JT here is a retired Marine, so he knows a lot about stress.
A little
So,
bit.
and JT, one of the things I remember, and we see all the time, that when we're on active duty, right, we're in shape because we have to be. We're held to a standard. But I can tell you, it was the worst shape I've ever been in my life. Was about a year and a half after I left the military, and
Mm.
because what I had to do was now my choice, right? And for whatever reason, I didn't keep up the the programs that I and of wellness, and so it hit me hard. So what, JT? You just now I know you. You're close to me. We spend a lot of time together. I'm going to ask you, what kind of shape you in now that you're retired?
Well, it depends. It's a different kind of shape, right? Because it depends on how you define
Well,
wellness,
round is a shape. So,
right? Um, one of the things that occurred to me that I think we've talked about and just sparked an idea in my head was the idea of the power of systems.
mhm,
I spent almost 3 decades in the Marine Corps. Obviously, there's a very strong culture that requires you to be ready. And we focus on readiness, and that's not only our equipment and our training, but our bodies. We are expected to be in fighting shape. And in the best organizations, that readiness encompass not just physical readiness, but mental readiness, spiritual readiness, social readiness. And so having a well-rounded view of what readiness, and I guess in this case, wellness, really means. And when you're in an organization where that is part of the fabric and it's part of the expectation, it's easy to just follow along and do the things that everybody does and you're expected to do. And so when you're outside of that and you've transitioned and, we're like, finally, I don't have to, take a physical fitness test, or a combat fitness test, once or twice a year. And so I've got to do, put all this mileage on my body. You're like, okay, I can stop doing that. But when you stop doing that and you stop having the pressure and the expectation, now it becomes a choice. And it says, okay, well, how do I replicate the habits that are going to allow me to be well and healthy into, the next stage of my life? And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people with that transition is physical wellness as they leave that system.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with.
No,
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry,
I was
Larry.
actually going to ask you a question. It's like, let's take a scenario to where, we've got a company that has come to us and said, we want a crisis-proof organization. And, we help them build the strategies. We help them build the systems and all of that. But how would you come in and help them build wellness within that organization? And why would you suggest what you're suggesting?
It's a great question. So it's important for us to remember that the people that we're working with are people. So they're not just cogs in the wheel to be able to accomplish some sort of task, but we have to look at what we know, and from physiology, from biology, from psychology, all of those areas in which we think about how a person is functional, let alone optimally functional. And what JT just said is you have to have systems in place. And so if one is able to say, well, I know how to create systems for all kinds of aspects related to crises, then creating a system is just creating a system for wellness, for health. And what's really important is to have opportunities to recognize we need to take some breaks periodically throughout the day. Having physical activity is really helpful. I mean, if you have, I was in an organization one time where we had meetings that ran from top of the hour to top of the hour to top of the hour to top of the hour. And after 3 or 4 hours, people were just totally burnt out. And so what we realized was it would be better if we just said, full stop, meetings that we have to have are going to be 45 minutes long. And in that 15-minute window, we're going to do 10 minutes of a workout. We're going to do push-ups. We're going to do squats. We're going to go up and down the stairs, whatever the people wanted to do. And sometimes we had a leader and sometimes everybody did it on their own. And then we came back, and after that 15-minute of refresh and reset, people were really ready to be much more productive, and they appreciated the opportunity because they felt better. They literally felt better because we were allowing people to live as humans are supposed to live, with body movement, with mental breaks, with refreshment and water. Mm-hmm.
Why is it that that's important, especially during meetings? Because first of all, meetings are important. I understand that, but I can pretty much bet 80% of the meetings that an organization has are not needed because they don't run them effectively. But if you're an organization and you're having these long meetings, why is it important to get up and move around? I mean, or if you're sitting behind your desk and you're on Zoom calls, what is that?
That's right. Why do we actually do that? And we do that because of tradition. And that's how we think if we keep to our desk and we keep working, that we're going to be more productive. But actually, productivity really drops off after somewhere around 90 minutes for sure. Longer than that, you're just really skating on thin ice. So you should, in the course of 2 hours, give yourself at least a 15, 20-minute break and then get back at it, and you'll be much more productive. It's the opportunity for the brain's chemicals to reset, for your body to just step back and refresh. And when you actually engage with physical movement, and if you can, wherever possible, do some strength training if you have brought weights to your office or whatever, we know that it builds emotional resilience. We know it's not as great doing that as it is being in the gym for a really solid, hard workout, but it's definitely something. So those are called exercise snacks. And there's been a lot of benefit, both from a physical perspective as well as from a mental perspective, in terms of optimizing people's ability to be productive.
Did you call it an exercise snack?
I did. I'm not the one that coined the term. In fact, I thought I did, and then later I read that somebody else was calling it that, and that other person was really well known. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to say that coincidence. But yeah. So that's what we do with our clients is we have them identify, and just as JT was saying, you need some systems. When are you going to do these things? Right now, what we know is there's literature out there that says that sitting is the new
Yeah.
smoking. It's really deleterious to health. And it's important to not be sitting when you can, be standing, and it's important to be able to keep moving whenever you can. So I was also at one point in an organization where we had what were called standing meetings, and we normally think that that means it's on the calendar every week on a regular time. But these standing meetings were literally everybody stood up, and that meant that they were quite short. They were really to the point, and everybody went on with their day. But they also had the benefit of standing up because sitting is the new smoking.
Yeah, I did. Before I retired, I had my weekly team meeting was a walking meeting. So it was an hour
Mhm.
and we would walk. If it was good and nice outside, we'd walk outside. If it wasn't, then we'd do the stairs. So everybody prayed for sunshine because they hated doing the stairs. But I'm like, 'cause I made a choice years ago that I will not take an elevator. Not because I'm claustrophobic. It's just I can literally get there faster by foot, and it's better for me. So just some of those little tweaks. Um, so here's a question: every organization right now, we have some organizations, depending on the size, may have 4 to even 5 generations working. What does wellness look like when we're trying to apply it across different fitness levels, age levels, and all of that?
Oh, that's such a great question. What I would say are a couple things. One is that don't discount somebody who's older. I am going to be 68 in a few weeks, and I feel like I am actually stronger physically and mentally than I was when I was
Yeah.
45, for sure. So I think the number on the pedometer doesn't necessarily mean the number on the body. So I think you have to think about it that way. But I think the other part about it is a leader needs to embody the
Mm.
culture that they want within their organization. And for them to say, I'm going to be having a standing meeting, I'm going to have a walking meeting, I am going to build time into my day to make this happen. And I'm not going to expect that my employees are going to work from 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. And sometimes there are crises, and those are things that have to happen. You have to really put in long hours, but that can't be the status quo forever and forever. So how one builds that in is really dependent upon the organization and that leader. But I think the leader, literally as the leader, needs to set the stage to say, this is really important and we are going to do this. And I want you to find some things that are going to work for you because it's really important that you're healthy. It's also really important because I care about you as a person. So I think there's this sort of fine parsing out of, I need you to be healthy so that you can be a contributor. Cool. That's great. That's a big reason for doing that. But the other is because I think you're a nice person, that I like you, or that you're a contributor, or that I just value the fact that you are a human on the planet. You deserve the opportunity to choose some wellness practices for yourself. But I think there's a need for us to recognize that we start wherever we start. And as we say to our clients who are strength trained, progressive overload, you consistently work on
Mhm.
getting better day in, day out. And that's really what's going to get you the gains as opposed to some heroics and all of a sudden you crash and burn and then don't
No,
continue that.
absolutely. So JT, how did you set the example when you were in the Marines as a commander and a couple times, for your troops? Because we kind of fell into that first category. I want, fitness so you're a better contributor. There was no love lost on us about, we care about you. We want you to stay in shape.
Yeah, I mean, we had the discussion about the kind of the manpower side of it, just a very kind of X's and O's numerical side of things. We always
Mhm.
had a mission that we mapped to a certain number of people. And of course, we never get the amount of people sent to us that mission
Right.
mapped to. So we're always at a deficit. And then when you add in other state statuses of people, where people are maybe moving between duty stations, or maybe they're ill or they're physically not capable of functioning, so that number just keeps getting smaller and smaller, but the things you need to do doesn't get any smaller with it. And so whenever we had welcome aboard briefs, we always talked to our people about the importance and just recognizing that every person mattered in the organization. I mean, we valued them because of who they were, because of the title that they had earned, but also because we needed, we needed work that had to be done. I mean, we had to be ready as an organization. And when we're not, that burden tends to fall on other people. And so we all want to be contributors to the greater good. But I've been in organizations where, how well you were respected or valued was dependent upon, how late you left the building, how early you got there and how late you left. How available were you on the weekends, when there was things that popped up, so we all respect people who are committed and dedicated to an organization and a mission. And we all understand that there has to be times when maybe you surge and maybe you're in a particular position where you've got to be available. But there are also ways to balance that. And I love what Karen said about modeling, because modeling behavior is huge. You can say all you want about balance and wellness, but if you don't model that behavior yourself, then the audio doesn't match the video, and people tend to believe what they see, not what they hear. And so when you're the last person in the parking lot, when you're the boss, everybody's going to say, oh, that's the expected behavior. And if I'm not doing this, then I'm not considered valuable in this organization. And when you say it's important that we're physically healthy, and yet you're in the office coughing and hacking and sweating because you're not physically well, you're sick. You're like, oh man, the boss is there and the boss is unstoppable. Well, the boss is getting everybody else sick and is not demonstrating that it's smart to go get yourself healthy and well so that you can come back and actually function effectively. If you believe that physical fitness is important, okay, do I dedicate work hours to being able to exercise, or do I expect you to do that on your own as an extra? So there's so many facets that I think leadership sets the tone, not only audibly, but also visually. And that's extremely important.
That's a good point. How do we build that infrastructure so that it not only creates, the ability, but creates the desire and capability to stay in shape? I know when I worked, before I retired, we had 3 hours a week on, government time that we could work out. We had a great gym in the facility. And, so I would take advantage of those 3 hours. And then the other 2 days I would use my lunch break to work out. But how do we do that, Karen? What does an infrastructure of wellness look like?
I think it starts with deciding what people can do. And it goes back to your point, Larry, about you have many different generations. And even in one generation, you have different capabilities. What I find with our current clients is that they come to us because they want to be healthier, they want to be stronger, they want to eat correctly, but they just don't know what to do, how to do it. And so giving them free rein to just go do something is often really unproductive because they're just not skilled. And even though they're motivated, they are not going to be effective at it. So what my business partner, Ryan McQueen, and I talk about is that we have a very low health literacy in the United States. There's not that people don't desire to be healthy, but they just don't know what to do. So having some kind of a support, whether people maybe buddy up or, if there's somebody like yourself, Larry, who would know what to do to help somebody who might be a mentee for you in the gym and show them what to do, that could give them just enough expertise to get going, because what you have to do is lower the friction to progress. That's really, really key. And I think, back to your other point about people being there late at night, there's a difference between being a contributor and being present, right? So presenteeism is an actual term, and 90% of workers nowadays through all the businesses, so this is just a generalization, 90% of all workers do not take a single break throughout the day. And so that presenteeism, because then they just get drained and they're not really being productive, that costs, I looked this up, it costs last year $150 with a B billion in terms of productivity. So just spending a lot of hours working doesn't mean you're actually being a really productive contributor. So getting a chance to do all these opportunities for
Yeah.
health, and and we'd even talked about emotional health or mental health, but that's also a contributor for people to be able to take advantage of. You might have programs on site where people are
No,
working.
absolutely. And it's funny you're talking about, nobody taking breaks. And I don't know, JT can relate to this, but I found that the only people that regularly took breaks every hour in the government were smokers because they have to leave the building. And so, and they would be out there 15 minutes and come back. So they're getting more time away from their desk than people that didn't smoke. But our gym in our building, they actually had trainers paid for by the government that were in there to help you. And and here's why I think that's important. I have a great my son's OT, she's more than an OT. She's a mind body specialist and fellow for I can't even remember the organization, but I went to her week before last, and because my left knee was hurting, right, and I'm thinking I was getting a Baker's cyst on it, and I'm like, I can't get out and exercise. It hurts. So I go in there, and for 45 minutes, she just watches me do things, right? And realizes that, hey, your hamstrings are shortened because you're sitting too much. And I got a standing desk, and I do stand a lot. But, little things like, hey, she had me stand there and say, lift your foot from the heel up. And it's like, why are your toes coming up first? And I'm like, I don't know. Isn't I supposed to do that? And she's no. And like, here's why your left knee's hurting, because your right leg is overworking and causing, it was ridiculous. So she gave me all of these exercises and stretches to do. And now my leg's feeling better and I'm getting back aligned. But to your point, and that was kind of a long lead into this, but just being able to say, hey, you can go to the gym when you want. You can do this. If I'm doing the wrong thing while I'm in there, then I'm doing more damage than anything else. So that education, I think, is extremely important. And one of the things I've noticed that a lot of insurance companies are lowering your rates if you take advantage of some of their monitoring things like blood pressure. I get a free blood pressure gauge, and I use it every day just to maintain, make sure I'm keeping it low, blood sugar, everything. Gym memberships. So are these some things that you've seen in organizations to where, hey, we'll pay some of your gym membership or offer you that as a stipend, or is that a benefit I can negotiate?
Yeah, that's a really common thing to do because in HR of those organizations, they know that investing in employees is not just sending them to professional development, but it's really personal development in those ways. And anybody who's been to a gym, who works out and gets a good sweat on, comes back ready to, you know how your mind is going to work, right? Your mind is so much sharper because you have been able to reset yourself and you're ready to go for several more productive hours rather than the afternoon slump of, I've eaten the wrong things and I've been sitting at my desk all day and I just feel terrible. Yeah, it's an all round plus. And I think if we realize that wellness is not really a luxury, it's really a capacity builder. That is fundamentally good business sense for sure.
So here's one for you. What's the importance of an afternoon nap? How does that fit into wellness? I'm trying to get some support here so that it doesn't bother my wife if I'm laying out on my mat in the afternoon for 20 minutes.
Well, here's what you can tell your wife, and that is this. If you ever watch Olympic athletes who are at the top of their game and the purpose is to be the best of the best, they are not only professional athletes, they are professional nappers. And what we tell our clients is resting is not a reward for what you've just done, which is often what we think of rest for. Rest is a strategic move to be ready to go again. And so as a person who loves and I literally have it dialed into on my watch, it says 22 minutes. I take a 22-minute nap on the days where I really feel at around 2 o'clock that that's going to be a value for me. I don't take any longer than that because it can interrupt my sleep at night. And 10 minutes seems to be a little bit too short. So that's how I figured out 22 is like the sweet spot for me. I don't do it every day, but I would say probably 3 days a week. It's such a value add to my life, and it gets me so much more out of the rest of my day. Yeah, you've got to see it as a prep for what's to come.
I think as a society, we should pick this up because, our kids in kindergarten take naps. And then once they hit the first grade, it's all over. How much more they would learn if you let them take a 20-minute nap every afternoon all the way through high school. I'm just saying. Oh, well, I don't want to get off track. So we've talked about, the importance of establishing wellness within an organization, both personally and as an organization, and some ideas on how to do that. Let's talk for a few minutes that we have left. What's the consequences if we don't?
Well, I think we can see the consequences if we don't, because I think we're living in that kind of an environment for most organizations. And it's, I'd say it costs $150 billion for people who are present but not really effective. Managers, they are 70%, they contribute to 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores. So if a manager isn't able to think about how to get themselves to the point where they are a leader about wellness, then that's going to just be one more area where their employees are just going to be less engaged. So I think it starts with an individual. Number one, you might be a manager, might be a leader, but you're yourself not as healthy as you need to be. So how do you step up and take ownership for yourself? And if you are already doing that, how do you then work with your team, or how do you work with your smaller teams, and then in the whole unit, how you bring that together and say, this is a focus. And I think the ability to not only motivate people from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective is there. There's going to be pushback for sure. Some people are going to say, my feet hurt, my knees hurt, I got a Baker's cyst, I can't do stuff. But there's stuff that can be done. Everybody can start somewhere, and it's very small steps sometimes. But it's going to make a huge difference. So really saying we're committed to doing it, I think and being verbal about it is important.
Awesome. JT, you got anything to add?
No, I think one of the powerful things that's available in leader development is coaching. I've had a number of conversations with people who have struggled with, their ability to maintain balance. And a lot of times balance involves different aspects of wellness, whether that's relationships, whether that's balancing your identity, or how do you get the right amount of sleep when you've got a lot of demands on your time, and the job always seems to be all consuming. And so having some of those conversations where you take a step back and you can just explore that a bit and go, what's really true about this, and what's maybe holding me back, and what are some of the options that I can do to find ways to achieve a better sense of balance in what I'm doing. And I found that some of those coaching conversations can be very powerful and very impactful when you're focused on those sorts of things.
Awesome.
I think you make a really good point, JT, that sometimes we just need to talk to somebody who can be somebody that we bounce ideas off of, and they can give us some ways to rethink what we're thinking. Love
Absolutely.
that.
So, Karen, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. You have such amazing insights around wellness and fitness. So if you had to give, say, one thing to our listeners who are leaders of organizations and teams that may be struggling with burnout and trying to prepare for a crisis when it comes to wellness, what would you tell them?
I would say start somewhere. There's not one perfect place to start, but if you don't start, you'll never get there. So just start somewhere, take small steps. The biggest thing is consistency. Consistency is king to be able to make progress.
Awesome.
For sure.
Thanks so much. Well, next week, not next week, but the week after you see this, because remember, I'm on vacation next week. Next week, we're going to have some guests in. We're going to talk about building a counterintelligence program within your organization to prevent crisis from starting and handle it when it comes in. And no, we're not going to make you into spies. Don't worry about that. But we'll have some fun conversations. We'll actually bring in some spies to talk to you. So again, thanks for joining us on Crisis Proofing Your Organization. And we look forward to seeing you live next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.